promoting the ownership and use of electric vehicles in Vermont. And it comes in response to Section 25 of Act 158 of this legislative session, 2018, which requires the Commission to submit a report and recommendations to the legislature by July 1st next year. Our goal is to identify and eliminate barriers to the widespread adoption of electric vehicles, to electrify transportation in Vermont to the fullest extent possible. The scope of the overall investigation is broad, and that's why this is just the first of several workshops. We'll be looking at everything from rate structures for EV charging, maximization of benefits to the grid, for example, possibly heat management, jurisdictional clarity, funding for transportation infrastructure, since EVs being a gas sector, we still have those technologies, safety standards, and basically overall strategies to maximize the deployment of electric vehicles at the pace necessary to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals. And why is this so important? Because although our percentage of renewables in the electric sector continues to grow, our greenhouse gas emissions are rising. Why is that? Because of the way we get energy. Transportation is the 47% greenhouse gas emissions, 47%, and it's rising. It outdistances all other sectors, including residential and business heating, commercial heating. So, you all I hope you have a handout. So, if not, it's up at the table. Today's workshop's agenda is on the top of the first page of this handout. On the opposite side, we have the schedule for the day. There will be an hour for each panel, with a 5-minute presentation by each panelist on each panel, followed by a general question and answer session for that. We'll take a 10-minute break between each panel, with a lunch break from 12:35 to 1:30. Restrooms are located in the main part of the stage house to the right. Finally, before I introduce my sister, Commissioner Sarah Huffman, and by the way, we also have commission staff here. John Cobb, Ryan Sarah. I finally want to thank the Department of Public Service for their help in organizing today's panels, especially Corey.
I don't know. Somebody's mic is open.
And including making it possible for this roast to be on the first panel of video conferences. And we are also recording today's proceedings to post on our website. And now I'd like to introduce Commissioner Sarah.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Cheney. We really are very pleased to be here. I think it's going to be a very interesting day. I want to add my thanks to the department, and particularly to Corey for helping us with all our technology needs. I also have a statement from Chairman Roisman, who can't be with us today. And his statement is, I'm sorry I cannot be with you in person. I consider this one of the most important tasks that we at the Public-Utility-Commission will be undertaking over the next few years. I know it's equally important to the Public Service Department, the legislature, and all of you. Today and over the next month, we will learn a great deal about electric vehicles and how they can transform not only our transportation system, but our entire energy system. Vermont has been a leader in innovation and implementation of energy efficiency and renewable energy, and through our efforts, we have led the way to major changes throughout the U.S. We now have the opportunity to apply the Vermont way to the task of electrifying our transportation sector both efficiently, effectively, and expeditiously. I look forward to working with all of you in achieving this goal. Thank you.
And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dave Roberts, who will be the facilitator for the first panel, which is on the current and future state of electric vehicle ESE technology. I'm sure you'll explain this. And perhaps you could also introduce your fellow panelists, or they could introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Hi, good morning, everyone. Dave Roberts here. I coordinate the Drive Electric Vermont program. I work at the nonprofit Vermont Energy Investment Corporation. Happy to be here today with all these wonderful panelists. Looking forward to the day. So to my right is John Gilbrook from ChargePoint. To my left is Scott Fisher from Greenlots, Brian Zelis from Nissan, Fuad Baruni from Flow, Celia Deagi from Siemens, and that is our panel. So, looks like the technology is coming together here. So I have a brief presentation, which, let's see, we may have to just advance. There we go. So just terminology to start with, EV and EVSE. So by EV, we're talking about plug-in electric vehicles, and that could be either all-electric vehicle powered solely by a battery or plug-in hybrid powered by a combination of battery and internal combustion engine gasoline engine. In Vermont, about 70% of the EVs, so to speak, are plug-in hybrids, and about 30% all-electric at this point. And then other term, EVSE, so that stands for Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment, and that is generally referred to as charging equipment, but for technical reasons that I'm not going to dive into, the official technical term is EVSE, but for purposes of discussion today, I think we can just call it charging equipment or EV charging equipment. So we're going to go basically in order from the agenda of the presenters this morning. And so I'm just going to say a few words about Drive Electric Vermont. It's a public-private partnership that the EIC coordinates. This is separate from the work that the EIC does as the Efficiency Vermont Energy Efficiency Utility. So just to be clear in this PUC audience, that the work that the EIC does for Drive Electric Vermont is separate from Efficiency Vermont. We have quarterly stakeholder meetings that we've organized since 2012, so we've been doing this for 6 years now. And we're a good forum for coordination across all the various entities that are working on EVs in the state of Vermont and beyond. We also engage in marketing, education, and outreach on electric vehicle technology and work on supporting charging infrastructure development across the state. We do have a website, driveelectricvt.com, which is meant to be more of a consumer-facing marketing tool, so provides a lot of helpful information both to consumers as well as EV owners looking for places to charge, things of that sort. We did a survey back in 2016 looking at different aspects of consumer adoption for electric vehicles in the state. This is just a snapshot. There's a link to that slide at the bottom of this. I think these will be made available to the presentations today. Number one purchase barrier in this survey was price. About 25% of the respondents said that was their top barrier to thinking about an electric vehicle purchase. Range was at 12%, basically tied with charging infrastructure availability. So those are the top three. Interesting to note, we did a similar survey in 2014, and at that point, range was 25% of the survey respondents said that range was the top issue for them. So we see range concerns are coming down a little bit as we have more plug-in hybrids and longer range all-electric vehicles, but still one of the top concerns. Another important factor for Vermonters is availability of all-wheel drive with our winter conditions. So that haven't been many electric vehicle models that have all-wheel drive available, so that's a concern for many consumers here. Tracking registrations. So we started back in July 2012. There were about 90 EVs registered at that point in time. We've seen very steady and significant growth over that time. Since this past July is the latest update we have, 2,600 vehicles registered. It's about 40% annual growth rate. But I did just throw on the Comprehensive Energy Plan goal for 2025, which is about 10% renewably powered transportation. In Vermont, that would mean about 45,000 light-duty vehicles. You can see we have quite a bit of work to do if we're going to meet that 2025 goal for the CEP, let alone the 2050 goal to get to 90% renewable by 2050. just a snapshot of where Vermont sits in the regional EV market. We actually have the highest market share east of the Mississippi. We do have good adoption relative to other states in the Northeast, but still, as I mentioned, quite a ways to go. Public charging availability. We have about 160 charging stations across the state. The chart on the right side of this slide shows level 1, which is the standard 120 volt home outlet type of charging. Level 2 is the 208, 240 volts, or like an electric clothes dryer, much higher powered. You get about up to 20 miles of range per hour charging on level 2. And then the DC fast charging, which will give most vehicles an 80% charge in 30 to 45 minutes. The fast charging, we have about 25 locations across the state, and those are the green tips on the bar. So you can see we had sort of a burst of charging infrastructure development in 2015 and 16, and then in 17 and 18 it's tailed off a little bit. I think some of that is waiting on the VW diesel settlement funds that are just now starting to flow. People are, thinking they would like to take advantage of those grant programs to support charging infrastructure development, but it does speak to issues with getting more charging across the state. With that, the next presenter is Scott Fisher, and I don't think Scott has a PowerPoint,
No.
which is great. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Just timing-wise, like 5 minutes, kind of. Okay, I may occasionally just kind of look over there to make sure or hit me if I'm going a little long, Dave, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
You don't mind.
Scott doesn't have a PowerPoint.
Right, so my name is Scott Fisher. I'm Vice President of Market Development for Greenlots, which is an electric vehicle charging station service provider. Most of our work is for either utilities or other entities. Our biggest customer right now is Electrify America, so we're providing the software for Electrify America's nationwide high-speed charging rollout, which is, I think, a huge boon for the industry. I think in terms of the overall topic, where we are with EVs and EV technology, I think what we're seeing is a maturation of the industry compared to where we were a couple of years ago. You see companies like Greenlots. When I started about a year ago, we were 20 employees, and now we're up to 70 employees. There's a number of companies in our industry that are similarly growing. And part of that is that there's a significant amount of venture capital in the industry because investors believe that the charging stations, together with the vehicle technology, is going to be a much bigger part of our society, and are excited about investing in it. So, I think part of what's great about being here, and I can remember, I've always seen in my work over the years in the energy industry, I've always seen Vermont as a leader in new technologies and energy innovation. Before I was at Greenlots, I was at EVgo, and I'm pretty proud to have been part of the work that Green Mountain Power did to roll out the charging station network in this state. And that was really a foundational network, and did show Vermont as a leader in this area, and I think probably plays a role in the fact that Vermont does have the highest penetration east of the Mississippi of electric vehicles. What we're seeing right now is, in terms of charging station deployments, we're seeing the states and public utility commissions outside of kind of the typical West Coast states really taking this issue seriously. So, for example, I live in New Jersey, and PSE&G, which is our biggest utility, just did a filing with the BPU there for a $365 million EV charging station program, and there's a bill going through the legislature there. We're about to start a project with the utility in Florida. I came back from Columbus, Ohio last week, where AEP, which is one of the utilities there, is doing a major charging station program. All of these are with Public Utility Commission funding. And I think maybe the point I would make about that is, so number one, it's not just a California thing. It's spreading to blue states and also red and purple states, because people see the benefits, both the economic benefits, the environmental benefits, and kind of just the overall effect on the industry, on the grid and the grid benefits. So I think that's part of what's going on. I think also, and I know Vermont's been a leader in the solar industry as well, where it was kind of like the utility here set a tariff and got out of the way, and kind of the private sector took over from there. And I think what we're seeing in the EV industry is that it's not a perfect analogy, that there is a bit of a stronger hand needed from the Utility Commission. And part of that's because just the economics, right? When we build charging stations, our cost of goods sold is the retail price of electricity. Whereas when you put in a solar array, your cost of goods sold is effectively zero, right? I mean, the sun produces the electricity. And so the economics of kind of just letting the market take over, the economics are not quite there. To the extent that you want to make a profit, you're charging people in the public space significantly more than they would otherwise be paying for electricity. And so that's kind of one reason why things like the VW settlement, utility commissions are getting involved across the country, is that charging stations just will not happen if it's just kind of let 1,000 flowers bloom and the competitive market take over. The second reason is that I think there needs to be more attention paid within the charging station world to the grid benefits compared to solar. Solar's built, puts on the grid, it's electricity like everything else. I think the opportunity we have with charging stations is that, first of all, you're adding incremental load to the grid, so that's in general good for ratepayers, good for utilities. So that's one thing. But secondly, you do want to manage from a kind of ratepayer benefit perspective. You do want to manage sometimes when people are using the stations, and the idea is that you put in more charging stations, you get more throughput through the system. But if you do it right, you don't actually necessarily need to make corresponding incremental benefits and new distribution infrastructure to be successful if you manage it correctly. And part of what I think Green Lots has been doing with a lot of utilities, or starting to do with a lot of utilities, is really help those utilities manage that grid integration aspect, whether it's things like demand response or time of use pricing. We and others in the industry are spending a lot of time thinking with utilities how to best manage this new asset on the grid. So I think we're at a great point in the industry. There's a lot of investment going in. There's a lot of excitement in the industry. Yeah. Finish up? Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of excitement in the industry. But we do feel like we need what we're doing here, the Utility Commission and the utilities being more closely involved than perhaps they've been in other sectors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. So next, Celia, you can get the mic over to her.
On.
We can try. I'm going to pass down the clicker. We can try this. I'm not sure if it'll work with your PDF, so we may just have to have them advanced.
Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. Good morning. I'm Celia from Siemens. Thank you guys very much for having us. This is an exciting day. It's going to be an exciting journey, I think, for all of you guys. I am based in Atlanta, but I think, like a lot of our peers, we've worked with organizations all across the country as Siemens and across the world, really on making a transportation electrification or e-mobility journey possible and making it a smooth ride for everyone. So I wanted to take a minute this morning just to share a couple of the observations that we have gathered as Siemens. I think Siemens, global manufacturer of electronic products, healthcare products, very large company, German-based. I hope that's clear. But the next slide, if excellent, yeah. So
I wonder if this microphone's too close to the...
I'm getting it.
Mute the person on the
Try that.
Excellent. Yeah. So we at Siemens, the first thing that we always like to mention is that it really in transportation electrification is not just about the charging station that is charging the actual vehicle. Yes, it's important to make sure that the driver that's charging their vehicle at that charging station has a good experience and the charging station is available and it has good features, but really when you are electrifying transportation, you're also thinking about the grid infrastructure that has to go in, all of the extra energy that's going to be dispersed into these new loads that are coming onto your grid, and you're thinking about managing that infrastructure. So while a lot of people get really caught up on the features of the actual charger and the lights and whatnot, it's important to think about that it is actually an electrification project and it's a construction project at heart. You're putting in new infrastructure to power all of this. I think the utility absolutely plays a critical role in providing the infrastructure and providing the energy and then helping to drive this movement forward. And next slide will show kind of Siemens's portfolio again across the globe. There's been a lot of lessons that we've learned in our first about 100,000 deployments globally of electric charging infrastructure. It was somewhat of a slow start, but especially these last 9 months have been very rapidly accelerating. A lot of funding coming into the industry, a lot of creative companies coming in with good technology, and definitely this is a growing industry, and it's absolutely very exciting to be in. The next slide will show again that there are two disruptions really that are happening: a disruption in transportation with items that I think we're all hearing a lot about, even if they're sort of somewhat still nebulous, but autonomous vehicles, shared mobility, as well as on-demand, having a car, not so much owning it anymore. And on the other side, you have the disruption in energy, which is it's more and more becoming decentralized and definitely being digitalized at the same time. At the center of this, though, is electrification. So both in energy and in the disruption of transportation, both of those are centering on electrification, which is, I think, why we're all here today, partially. The next slide will then show, too, that there are a couple of factors that are important to pay attention to from this electrification standpoint. One, by 2030, there's 12 million estimated just residential chargers that are going to be coming online or will be online. Residential charging is and will probably continue to be about 80% or more of the vehicle charging in general. And if you think about this just in terms of size, a charger that is usually located in a home is 2 to 3 times the demand of a normal home's peak demand. So if there are 12 million new chargers coming online, that also, I guess, represents 2 to 3 times of 12 million new homes coming online. So that's the size of the load that we're talking about when it's just residential. For the next observation on the next slide, the other point that really drives us home and what I was saying at the beginning, it starts slow, but when it comes, it really comes. So you see it centralized, and you see it fast, and you see large loads. This particular picture is China, so maybe we're still in the U.S. and we'll do it our own way. But this was a 10 megawatt load coming online. That again represents about 10,000 houses just coming online from one day to the other. These are loads that are very large. They need to be managed and they need to be forecasted and planned correctly. Last slide that I will show just for today, this charging, I hope it's very apparent that it needs to be managed. It needs to be smart just from a load perspective, because if it's not managed, I think you guys see that it can very quickly become very wild on the energy grid and destabilize, which would only negatively impact our transportation electrification efforts.
Thank you, Celia. Next up, Fuad.
Yep.
Get your presentation loaded here. And you might try using the clicker. It might work for you with the PowerPoint.
In the meantime, I can introduce myself. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fouad Baroni. I'm here to speak on behalf of Flow as Energy, company based in Canada. And I'm a product line manager taking care of the residential segment. So Flow is a company that belongs to Add Energy, and Add Energy, yes, Add Energy. You'll see it in the next slide, actually. And let me try to use the pointer here. Yeah, there you go. And the company has been created in 2009 in Quebec City. And we are a vertically integrated company, so we design, manufacture, and we operate networks. We have the largest network in Canada named Flow, and we are also partnering, and we actually operate two other networks owned by two utilities, Hydro-Quebec and INV Power. We provide charging solutions for our all market segment, and this is our actually main goal is to take care of the customer, the EV owner, from in any place actually. So that's the idea. He has the car, and we are trying to cover all market segment to make sure that he has access to charging infrastructure everywhere that he goes. So today we have more than 5,000 charging stations in our network. We have more than 15,000 EV drivers using our network, and we have 7 offices across Canada and USA with 125 employees. So emerging company trying to serve customers' needs and address customer needs. But these needs will be addressed with a lot of involvement from other partners, mainly utilities, and we'll see why. So first of all, as we are covering different use cases, we are going to provide different product lines covering the residential, the multi-residentials, workplaces, fleets, public, curbside. Wherever you go, you will have the opportunity to charge your car, and this will vary the different types of applications and needs and challenges as well. But there is always a need to have a network where the customer can have access to a cost-effective charging solution. If I go to the next slide, yeah, and one of the challenges that we are facing in Canada, and I think it applies a lot in Vermont here, is the weather conditions. And this, again, if we go back to the basics, customers needs to have access to reliable solutions, needs to have access to a critical device. We see it as a mission critical device, and that's why we need to design and to produce and operate our network in extreme weather conditions. So we try to provide reliable technology using reliable communication technologies and so on. Because at the end of the day, it's a matter of providing a best customer experience to our customers. Providing first-class customer service is also providing support, so 24/7 bilingual front line support for each driver, remote station monitoring to cover different aspects like charging support, billing, inquiries, remote access to the charging station, towing requests, charging stations, patient guidance, and so on and so forth. So again, it's a journey for the customer, and we need to provide and be present for all different use cases and scenarios. Trying again with my pointer to see if it works. Maybe if you can.
I think the slides got.
I think, yeah, this is the last one where one of the challenges that we see in our industry is the peak management. With a massive deployment of charging stations everywhere in different applications, we are expecting a stress on the grid. So demand response obviously is one of these possibilities where we partner with utilities to provide what we call centralized power management. But we also believe that there is other technologies that needs to be involved in a decentralized power management where we can offer the flexibility actually to the customer, especially where we have application like fleet or workplace, where we can provide, for example, the possibility to extend the infrastructure. So we can start with a small deployment, and then with power management features, we can offer the possibility to expand the charging infrastructure. So all these challenges can be covered in the future, and Flo is very happy to be part of these journey.
Thank you. Next, Britta Gross. So Britta, thank you for joining us remotely. We appreciate your patience with the technology and getting this arranged. So,
can we have a pause for just a second while I move the windows around for Britta?
Sure.
Yeah, while you're doing that, thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
You might.
Yeah, that was interesting feedback.
Yeah, if you turn down your volume a little bit, that might help.
Okay. It seems like it got better.
No, it didn't.
How's that?
Seems better.
Mic back to on top of her. It's not over that.
It's not doing it. It's a feedback is what it is.
You want the mic on it?
Yes.
I think, can folks hear directly from this, or does this need to be mic'd?
Can you guys hear me now? No, my computer mic is off, so I don't know.
That's better.
All right, well, we'll roll with it. Hopefully,
Okay.
solutions here.
Yeah, I apologize for not being there. I thank you for accommodating my schedule. I know how difficult that can be. And I'd like to be there in person because it's such an important workshop. If you can advance the slides up to my stuff. Oh boy, this is going to be painful for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to fix it from my end.
I saw a presentation a week and a half ago in Philly. Maybe I can do it.
Yeah, everybody knows my stuff. There are plenty of people in the room that know my materials. No, there it is again.
Let me just try to.
Well, is it too painful for you folks?
No.
Can we turn off headphones?
Yeah. Yeah.
Turn off the mics and then completely, and then have it just from there.
Can we turn off all the mics?
This one as well?
I don't know how. How do we turn off?
I don't know how to turn off the AV system, and the guy in the
Testing.
Can you guys hear me now?
Can you turn down the volume on your...
Yes. How about that?
That's better, I think.
Can you hear me though?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, let's just do this then. Real quick. I'll try to make it real quick so it's painless. Thank you again for accommodating. If you just flip to the next slide, I want to really just jump into the future of electrification and how we see it.
So on the next slide,
you can see that we have a vision as a company that's focused on 000. We announced it last year. It's underlined every single meeting I've been in for the last year since September of last year. Zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And if you let that just soak in for a second and think about how do you get to a future of no crashes, no emissions, and no congestion, you have to electrify. So our vision of the future is all electric. You know we have the Chevrolet Bolt today. It's the first affordable long-range electric vehicle in the market, 238 miles of range. We've also announced that we will have 20 new all-electric vehicles in the market by 2023. So that's electric. You also have to go to autonomous vehicles in order to deal with zero crashes. 94% of all fatalities today are due to human error. And so we view the future of zero crashes. You have to go with automated vehicles. We've also got a fleet of 180 autonomous vehicles operating in San Francisco and 2 other locations where we're developing on the roads with extremely safety-focused hardware and software technology, and we've announced that all of those autonomous vehicles will always be based on electric vehicles. So those are Chevy Bolts out in the field, testing every day and learning from each other. We've also announced that we would go in 2019 to commercial market at scale with these autonomous vehicles, and that means we've also asked permission to go without steering wheels and pedals and all the other human interface equipment. We're that far along. We have to make our safety check marks. We're right on track with those. So as long as we hold to our safety criteria, we will be ready to go next year with autonomous vehicles for commercial applications. Then you have to go to shared. The only way to deal with congestion, emissions, and even crashes is to go to autonomous, but also in shared mobility applications. We have an internal platform called Maven, where today we operate 900 Chevy Bolt EVs in 7 cities. The only thing preventing us from deploying more electric vehicles into these shared mobility services like Lyft, Uber, package deliveries, food delivery, and so on, is DC fast charging in urban settings. It's the only thing holding us back. The rule of thumb is 8 electric vehicles require 1 DC fast charge station. And so we sort of look around for communities that are not only receptive to sharing services, but also can support it with EV charging infrastructure. On the East Coast right now, we have these Maven Bolts in Baltimore, Boston, and DC. And the beauty of the shared mobility is not only does it serve as a shared solution, but also we have found that it is an extremely important EV education and outreach enabler. 2.4 million passengers in just a year and a half using only the 900 Chevy Bolt EVs have driven in those vehicles. The most popular conversation in those cars is, what am I driving? What is this? The drivers are excited, the passengers are excited, and it's become a huge EV outreach campaign for us. So we'd like to deploy more of these Bolt EVs into those markets and expand beyond. And then all connected through onboard telematics. We have the OnStar system. You're probably all familiar with that. 13 million subscribers to OnStar, where we have deep insights on EV driving and charging experiences that we're using to inform all of our programs. On the next slide, I want to just give you data, and you guys can look at this at your leisure too. But I wanted to sort of call to your attention the NREL National EV Infrastructure Analysis that came out last September. I like it because they haven't attempted to guess how many vehicles are going to be in the market. They just said, look, assume that we have 15 million EVs in 2030, which is about a 25% year-over-year increase from where we are today, which is pretty conservative because today we're exceeding that. If you assume that and sort of do sensitivity analysis around that assumption, you start to see that the kinds of estimates of what's needed for public work and workplace charging, including DC fast charging in highway locations, but also in the urban locations as well. And you start to see numbers like, to support those 15 million vehicles in 2030, you'd need 8,500 DC fast charging sites. That's about a 20 times growth factor over where we are today with DC fast charging, and it's an all new highway corridor system, and I'll talk about that in a second, what's coming. And then down at the bottom, I've just sort of grabbed a few states like Vermont in here so that you can see that they've done the breakout by states, assuming sort of regular adoption of EVs. They would expect to see 42,000 plug-in electric vehicles in 2030 in the state of Vermont and requiring 70 DC fast charging stations, whereas today there are 11 public open standard SAE DC fast charge stations in the state. So we need about a 6-fold increase to support the vehicles that are expected to be coming in 2030. And I will say that I'm not alone in the automakers. Just start adding up all the announcements by automakers over the last couple of years and what sort of is expected to happen between basically 2020 to 2023. So in the next 3, 4, 5 years, this is an incredibly important period of growth by automakers for EVs, and so we have to be prepared. On the next slide, I just want to quickly call your attention to 3 areas of significant infrastructure progress in just the last couple years. Several years ago, we couldn't have shown this kind of progress. I'm really excited about what's happening on infrastructure and that a lot of stakeholders, including Drive Electric Vermont and a lot of other stakeholders that are sitting with you in the room today, have pulled together and maintained a very strong dialogue about what's required nationally, what's required regionally, and so on to move forward with electric vehicles. So you see on the left-hand side the Electrify America program. That's a result of the VW settlement. You see that there's a plan for a national highway infrastructure. It's an open standard infrastructure. 15 of those stations are already operating today. They'll all be operating by June to December of last year. The last one will finally be up and running. So very, very excited about what that means. That's only the first investment cycle of 4 planned investment cycles. So more to come even on that. And they're also, in that first cycle, you can see the 17 cities that they plan to outfit with chargers as well, both level 2 and DC fast charging. In the middle, I'm really, really excited about this one. This is another outfall of the VW settlement, where each state was allocated funds to reduce NOx emissions that came out of the diesel emissions. And so each state could spend the money on 10 different causes that would drive NOx emission decreases. And one of the allowable uses of the funds was for EV infrastructure. And so, you know, a year or two ago when this first showed up, I thought, well, I'd be lucky if maybe we can sort of organize and you know, drive some stakeholder engagement across the states. And I'd be lucky if maybe 25 states would jump in and recognize that there's some funds available they could use for infrastructure. And I'm just really ecstatic that 41 states now, plus 2 additional that are very likely, have now committed to spending up to 15% of that fund, which is the max allowable, for EV charging infrastructure. So for me, that is not just a voice for, you know, the dollars that are going to go to EV charging, but it's an incredible rallying of the states to engage and put their hand in the air and say, yeah, we know that we're part of the solution for EV charging infrastructure. So I'm really happy about that. It's really important now to drive that the funds into the right direction so that it's very meaningful infrastructure and we don't squander the one-time opportunity. And then the third column, you see the utility investment, which is absolutely critical. In just the last several years, $1 billion has been approved by state commissions for EV-related investment in EV-related investment, and then $1 billion is pending today in additional EV-related investment by the utilities. So these are just the utilities I can see sort of publicly, the IOUs as they file their filings. So really excited about what's happening there. The utilities are going to have to be engaged. You heard Celia talk about the importance of being prepared on the grid to manage the charging of EVs. And that's another part of these investments here is towards, with an eye towards the scale of EVs and how important it is to make sure that the utilities are prepared to manage that charging both during nighttime and during the day. And then my final slide is just sort of highlighting, well, what else has to be done? Where are the barriers today in the marketplace? And I would say that, in my opinion, the biggest challenge today is to build a seamless system out of what today is really just a patchwork of various initiatives. So we have, on the left-hand side, I've talked about the infrastructure. Have you guys advanced to the next slide, maybe?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to have to, I think we need to cut you there because we're a little over time, but we do have the slides and look forward to your participation in the discussion. John,
you bet. Thank you so much.
Much better. So thank you for your patience with that.
And also, if she can hear me, I understand the first part of your presentation was a little difficult to hear. The second part was quite clear. Perhaps for the court reporter's benefit, you could email us if you have written down what you said. We'll get back to you on how to do that.
Okay, I'll give that a try.
Thank you.
Okay, so next, John Gilbrook from ChargePoint is here. So if you want to introduce yourself, we'll get your presentation.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody, for having me. I'm John Gilbrook. I'm the Director of Sales for ChargePoint in the Northeast U.S., as well as the Country Manager for Canada. Just give them one more minute to bring this over. Does this work?
It might. The PDF doesn't seem to be working as well. Can you advance the slide?
So ChargePoint is the largest EV charging network and company in North America, one of the leading in the world. We were founded in 2007 on the idea that EV charging, as EV adoption scaled up, was going to present certain challenges to business owners as well as utilities and state governments as they manage the introduction of that energy to the grid, as well as manage the social issues that result in offering EV charging. I'll call it the paradigm shift, going from stopping at a gas station, fueling up, and moving on to potentially using charging 3 or 4 times a day in everywhere from your home to your workplace to a rest area along the way. Today, we offer EV charging solutions in a variety of different applications. And the thing we've learned over the last 10 years is that EV charging is absolutely not is a right tool for the job kind of technology. It really requires a specific solution set that is adaptable to the needs, not just of a particular application, but the ability to evolve over time as the needs evolve. Things people needed 5 years ago for, say, just workplace charging have evolved greatly to what they need today, very different. So as you can see, there's just a variety of different needs. One interesting point, we're about just over 500 employees today. Half of those people, all they do is wake up every day and come up with new solutions to problems like this. So it's much more complicated, I'd say, than a plug in a parking lot. But it's evolving, and it continues to grow. Next slide, please. No problem. So this just gives you an idea of our kind of hardware spectrum today. So we see EV charging, as I mentioned, as a solution. So it's a combination of the right hardware, the right software, the right service package, the right advice to make that EV charging kind of solution successful in any application. But it's really important that as state government or regulators get involved and encourage certain programs, they leave room for technology innovation. If they can, they encourage such innovation, so we can continue to keep up with the needs of our customers. A great example of us keeping up is the station on the far right, which we're hearing more and more from a variety of analysts, which is scalable fast charging. It's the idea that, yes, we need charging at home at a lower rate and workplace at a lower rate, but as we electrify certain vehicle platforms, light duty included, we're going to need to be looking at really big and scalable fast charging solutions. So not something what we would call monolithic that you drop in the ground and rip out when the next thing comes around, but something you can build on as the technology evolves. And so it really drives, I think, that point home that this is a fast-growing, evolving, scaling industry, and we are building into our products now the ability to scale them without starting over. So it's really important that you kind of think about that as you develop programs and regulation around this stuff. Yep, next slide, please. So this just gives you an idea of just today some of the software features that we are, again, not really pushing out, but that are being pulled out of our technology division from our customers. I'll point out stuff like dashboard and analytics. I mean, 5-6 years ago, we had one station that people needed, and they weren't really that interested in tracking the energy or paying attention to that. Today, it's critical as they kind of evaluate the success of their EV programs, as well as plan for the future and just determine when they need to add more or change what they're doing. Power management, right? As sites add and scale EV charging from 1 or 2 stations to 20 or 30 or 200 stations, which is not an uncommon request today, by the way, projects that are that big. They need to be able to think about when people are going to need these charging stations, how the energy needs to flow back and forth and across, and what's the most cost-effective way to install those stations to meet the customer need, but in a cost-effective and intelligent, efficient way. And then I'll just point out again, driver services, this idea that you really, in order to have success with EV charging, you also need some service and support behind it. You need people that can help these people, as my colleague from Flow mentioned, this is a journey for customers. They're often, this is their first time with this, and they have a lot of questions. I mean, more than half of the calls that our support department in Arizona, we employ over 50 people. All they do is answer technical support calls. Half of those calls are just user error. hey, this isn't working for me and I don't know what to do. And they never have that issue again. So it really just drives that point home that you want to back this stuff up with service and support. Next slide, please. As we scale, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg now, I mean, all these great programs, you know, our 55,000 stations, Electrify America, Flow, and Green Lots, and this is just the very beginning. And as it scales, we really need to consider how we scale so that, you know, everything works together in a cohesive and harmonious way. And I think something that often gets overlooked when people consider interoperability is driver experience. Right? So you got to make sure that it's great that a business owner can buy 2 different types of charging stations and they can play together. But how about when the driver approaches those 2 different stations? Are they going to work the same? Are they going to behave? Are they going to get a consistent look and feel? And I think that becomes important as you start to reach into the market and try to get people that aren't early adopters, mass market folks. When you try to get them engaged, this has to be real, convenient, and easy and predictable. And then just one last slide, just to, I think, wet your whistle in terms of where this is going. I mean, we've just been talking about what I would call the usual suspects: home, workplace, fast charging, right? All great, just the beginning, right? So how do we prepare from a policy and regulation perspective to keep folks like us and the utilities and others innovating and striving for more? Transit's very close. And we're not too far from marine, from variety of fleet, autonomous, and flight. So it's all like just right there, and we're going to continue to expand. And we recognize that this opportunity is much larger than just the cars on the road.
Okay, thank you, John. So final panelist, Brian Zelis from Nissan.
Hi, my name is Brian Zelis. I'm the Electric Vehicle Business Development Manager for New England. I also work closely with utilities, universities, municipalities, and also businesses in developing programs for EV adoption in the greater New England area. What I guess I probably want to talk about is less about the what today and more about the why. Okay, because that's probably a little bit more fundamentally important to why EV adoption is crucial and necessary. The things I'll focus on today are going to be the EV economics, the EV empowerment that comes with adopting EV, and then also with the environmental aspects of it too. And I'll just touch on a couple of those things as they go through. But I think that primarily, how many folks in here actually own an EV, electric vehicle? Okay, so nice grouping of folks here. We mentioned part of the barrier was that price was one of the bigger issues, and I think that if most people asked you what an electric vehicle costs, most people would say, I know that it's really expensive, but if you asked anybody what a Tesla costs, most people wouldn't be able to tell you what they cost, right? So that's one of the barriers to it. Just whether or not I can afford it. So we are certainly the largest global player in the electric vehicle space at 325,000 units worldwide. We've sold about 120,000 in the United States, and we're selling more. We do have a new model out. You may be familiar with the old model, which was a little bit more polarizing than the current one. Ours, the new one, is very attractive. It has about 40% more range. It's easy to charge and also fairly inexpensive to own. Next slide, please. And we'll try and go through this quick. Okay, one more, please. Yeah, so cheaper to buy, cheaper to fuel, cheaper to own. Next. What we're doing to support these efforts is that we're providing a $5,000 rebate to folks through our utility partners. So this is Green Mountain Power, Washington Electric is back there. We also have VEC and also our friends at Burlington Electric Department. But we can't expand this to anybody else to make this available to others. And I wanted to show you this math stack here. So again, along with the expense of what is perceived as being an expensive car, $32,000 with our Nissan. I just put Green Mountain Power up there just because that one's what comes closest to mind. But it's $5,000, it's a $7,500 tax credit, and in the case of a GMP customer, and it's different for different utilities, be able to get other benefits. So in this particular case, $33,000 car you can buy for less than $19,000. Okay, next slide, please. What's important to keep in mind too is also the actual cost of ownership. So the thing that an owner can experience is almost like getting a raise, right? So a typical ICE or internal combustion engine car probably will cost you anywhere between $1,600 to $2,000 a year to operate when you consider maintenance costs, oil changes, gasoline costs that change a lot. I utilized $3.01 because it was that about a month ago. Now I think it's gone down a little bit, but it's going back up as we go into the markets there. Utilizing a 16-cent kilowatt hour to fuel your car would only cost you $508 in this example. Next slide, please. Part of the reason this relates to the environment, obviously, is the CAFE standards were implemented back in 1972. What you can see there is as we've increased the amount of CAFE standards for fuel efficiency in vehicles that are readily available now for ICE. Next slide, please. What we've also done is we've also increased in lockstep with that the amount of miles that we're traveling. So all the benefits that we're getting out of gasoline efficiency, we're blowing on driving a lot more. Okay. So the solution then, from an environmental perspective, is not so much the fuel economy; it's driving emissions free. Next slide, please. Clean, of course, we probably already know that, but next slide, please. So if you've had an opportunity to, you can go to the AirNow to see what AQI is. So it stands for Air Quality Index. And I took this snapshot 2 days ago, and what it shows that generally in the United States, with the drop in temperature, you can see that the air quality is good. That's what all that green stuff means there. Next slide, please. What I wanted to show you was an interactive air quality map for the Memorial Day weekend, and you can see there that we've got New York and Vermont, and what you see generally there is that up in Canada and up in Nova Scotia where it's cooler, the air is pretty good. Not so good in Vermont, and really not good at all on the other side of the Adirondacks. Okay, next slide, please. That's the whole weekend. So you see that big bunch of stuff that's over the Great Lakes there. That's going to come here, or it did, back then. But my point is that there's really an EV solution to mitigate this as it's propagated to the rest of the United States, but also it's critical here in Vermont. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Quality is the absence of variable. Our car has 145 less parts than an ICE car. So what that means is it's less likely to break. We have instances of cars out there that have never had a brake job, that have only gone in for service to replace the wiper blades. There's no oil to change. The cars really don't break, and partly as because of the regenerative braking aspects of it, it makes it a lot easier to not have to go through the braking. So next slide, please. I've been looking for this gas station. See, it's pretty well lit. I know the slide's pretty dim. It's very clean looking. I haven't been able to find this gas station. Next slide, please. I find that one most of the time. So what I'm trying to say by this, just by way of joke, is that we can take this part of the equation out of it, where you don't have to go to a gas station, giving you back more time and more hours back in your day. Next slide, please. Charging is fairly easy. We will provide you a cable that operates similar to like what some of our charging systems do, but we'll actually provide this to you with a particular package, and that'll give you L2 semi-fast charging utilizing your 240 that you already have in your home, and this cable will provide it to you, so you don't actually have to get one of those boxes. Next slide, please. And it looks just like that. It hangs on the wall. The wall-mounted the box in this case looks just like the dryer plug. You have electric heating for your dryer. It looks just like that. Next slide, please. And near zero maintenance, as I mentioned. Next slide, please. And we can go into this more in Q&A if anybody wants to ask, and that is the end of the presentation. Sorry for the delay.
Thank you, Brian. So now we've reached hopefully the fun part of this, some time for Q&A. I think we have about 15 minutes remaining in this panel. So I guess I first want to provide an opportunity to the commissioners if you had any immediate questions. I do have some on my end that I'm happy to launch into, but wanted to give you an opportunity.
I have a very simple one, which is the ultra-fast chargers. How long would the car charge to get an 80% charge?
So as today's cars, probably the challenge is that today's cars can't even accept the ultra-fast charging, right? And you would expect that when they can, they'll have longer ranges. So an 80% charge will be a little bit bigger. I think the target, and I'll leave it to my colleagues from Nissan and GM possibly to answer better, but my understanding is more like 10 to 15 minutes.
It's 30 minutes to get an 80% charge.
On ultra fast?
On a fast charge. On the current charging system, as you mentioned, that the current cars out there can't accept the ultra fast ones because they're not equipped to do that. So as it stands right now, we have about 30 minutes.
So we have both charging station experts and car dealership manufacturer experts. Could any of you address what is the chicken and what is the egg? What has to come first? Are we having a chicken-egg problem in terms of lack of infrastructure for the cars, therefore fewer cars, or vice versa?
85%, and I think it was mentioned by Celia, that 80 to 85% of the people who are currently charging in a car that had less than 100 miles of range, which is the previous iteration of the Leaf, charge at home. Some people in utilizing their cars have never utilized public charging. Where the increase in range has allowed for more people to be accepted, find our car more acceptable because of the range. Our stance on it, we are involved in infrastructure, and we were involved heavily in the corridor from Boston to DC, providing fast chargers to organizations like NYPA and things like that. We're not seeing this that our car currently as a commuter car will not be affected by that as much. So if that answers your question.
One thing that I would just add is 70% of the EVs in Vermont are plug-in hybrids, which have the ability to run on gasoline as well. So that makes the charging infrastructure requirements a little bit less stringent.
I'll add one more point to that, is that I think it depends what problem you're trying to solve. So, for instance, in workplace charging, employees that are offered workplace charging are 6 times more likely to buy an electric car than those that aren't. Now, whether they need that charger every day to get back and forth from home is another story. But in terms of inspiring adoption, infrastructure is absolutely a huge trigger. And then I think, as you heard some statistics from Britta on fast charging and level 2 coverage, when this thing really scales, we're absolutely not prepared for that in terms of infrastructure. So infrastructure is behind, but it has some of these other benefits that when you install it, it can kind of move the needle in terms of people feeling comfortable and getting people to buy the cars.
If you don't mind, I really like the analogy with the laptops. Wherever you go, even if you change from the meeting room, you're going to plug your laptop to a power source. So again, it's a journey, as we mentioned earlier, and I think any option or any opportunity where we can offer charging infrastructure to the EV driver would be great. So we've been talking about workplaces, malls, any other place where we can have reliable access to the network. He can use the charging infrastructure for that. And again, it's 30 or 40 miles in general per day of average. So even for the laptop, sometimes, I mean, we rarely run out of our battery in the laptop, but again, any opportunity to plug, it's always good. Yeah.
There could be more charging at apartment complexes. People that do not have access to modify a dryer plug so that they can utilize it in their home. And certainly workplace charging, I would certainly second what Mr. Gilbrook said, that definitely workplace charging is something that we're very interested in, and certainly if there's a company out there with a sustainability message, if they're at work, if their secondary place is work and the third place is retail, then the natural place that we need to advance more infrastructure and more charging is at work. So,
if I can address maybe the other side of that market. So, passenger vehicles, I think there may be still a chicken and the egg. I think the sector that is now coming online very quickly and heavily, pun intended, is medium and heavy duty. And there they really are doing a good job of thinking about the charging infrastructure that is going to have to come along with the electrification of fleets and buses, school buses, those kinds of transportation methods. So they're planning that into their projects a lot of the time. So it's getting better.
So I have a question. As was mentioned, the panel is intended to be current and future state of EVs and EV charging. And one of the issues that we have in Vermont is colder weather, colder climate. So a lot of the vehicles have originally been designed for maybe use in California, where there's a larger market, things of that sort. So in Vermont, you don't see as many all-wheel drive EV options, although they're starting to show up. And you also see significant reductions in range in the winter just because of the way the batteries perform in cold temperatures. So curious, I guess maybe starting with Britta and Brian and others, if you have thoughts on improvements in battery technology that will help improve range in colder conditions, as well as more options for all-wheel drive and larger vehicles, which are in Vermont about 60% of the new vehicle sales are the larger sort of crossover and SUV style. So any thoughts on that? No? No?
She could probably hear you.
Yeah. Sorry, Britta. I guess it sounds like we're having some difficulties with the AV, so maybe I'll hand this to Brian, and if we get that straightened out.
Our current card does have a cold weather package, so that you can turn the system on, and when you do, it has a heater that'll heat the battery, warming the battery, and getting it to perform better because it performs better when it's warm. You can also program your car to actually turn on at a certain time before you leave, so that it's more efficient when you do leave in the colder system. So you can turn it on half an hour beforehand, so the heat seats, airs, warmth in the interior, and you can do that all on your phone. So that's where we've applied that solution there too. As it relates to four-wheel drive vehicles, stay tuned. Infiniti, Nissan, Renault, Mitsubishi, we will have those cars available sometime in the future. I'm afraid I can't really give you too much more detail other than that. So.
And I guess we're not going to hear from Britta, it sounds like. Is there any?
She muted the microphone and trying to fix the problem earlier.
Okay. Other questions? So, John, you mentioned interoperability, and I'm hoping that you might be able to, you or others in the charging world, can shed a little light. Right now, folks who are charging in public, you probably have a number of different cards for different networks. Maybe give us a quick glimpse of what might be coming in the future, so you wouldn't need all those different cards.
Absolutely. So I think this is an interesting point, because a lot of times on the technology side, interoperability gets defined completely differently. It gets defined as the ability for a business to have different kinds of charging stations managed all one way, right? So a very commercial definition. But really what everybody seems to be asking about, people from the public, is, yeah, but I'm really interested in multiple apps, multiple cards, and all that. So because there was really a gap in the focus on this issue, a few years ago, ChargePoint actually co-founded an organization called Rove that allows EV charging networks to kind of come together. It's an industry organization to determine kind of standards and work together to make it so that their networks are kind of seamless, and so that basically, just like your cell phone or an ATM card, you can use one networks gear on other network chargers. And so we've begun working with some of the more prevalent network companies here in the United States, as well as Europe. I think what's happening beyond Rove is that, and my slide kind of illustrated this, is that as interoperability, however it's defined, and there's a few different, kind of focal points, evolves, so does how it all fits together, the roaming aspect too. But it's, I guess all I can say is it's coming along. There's a recognition that there can't be multiple cards, multiple apps, and all that. I think one way that so far people are getting around it, and it seems to be pretty convenient, is use of smartphone-based payment systems. So being able to just simply have the separate cards like on your phone, like Apple Pay, and being able to walk up to a station, double-click the button on your phone, and then tap using that.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on what John was saying. I was actually talking to my brother on the phone yesterday. He lives in Maine, and he bought a Nissan Leaf actually yesterday.
Congratulations.
I was just walking him through, how to do the fast charging, and you have to download this app, this app, this app, and so it's something that a consumer can't deal with, but it's not an ideal situation from having, especially new customers trying to figure it all out. He had me in this case, but. So I'll just agree with John that the industry is very much working towards, as we mature as an industry, working towards the idea of kind of one card for different networks and different stations. The one other interoperability piece, and John mentioned this as well, that's important is and this is something that Greenlots has been working on a lot, is standards between managing the charging station and from a technology perspective, and being able to use many different charging stations. So Greenlots, for example, we're taking advantage of a lot of the new charging stations that are coming from Europe, for example, that where we have one system, kind of one central management platform that's able to work with a dozen or so different charging station manufacturers. And sometimes those two issues are conflated, the driver roaming and then the station interoperability. We're certainly focused on both of those.
Time for one more.
Okay, one last question. So there was some conversation about the evolution of mobility as a service types of things, with growth in autonomous vehicles and electrification being a big part of that. Curious if folks have thoughts, and maybe start with Brian, on automakers offering vehicles as a subscription or partnering with ride-sharing entities to get more electric vehicles on the road. I know, for example, Uber has a program where they're working with drivers to get them into electric vehicles. So thoughts on sort of that future evolution of mobility as a service and where EVs fit into that.
Okay. What I heard was sort of how mobility or shared mobility kind of fits in with EV adoption. I've contended for a long time that, and we've seen it in the data, that what gets people to do EVs is incentives, also outreach. Right? So as I mentioned earlier, it was shown in the slide that Dan showed that there was the big cost barrier, or what people perceive as a cost barrier, when in reality it's probably about half of what you would perceive it to be. As it relates to shared mobility in EV space, we do have relationships with Uber. We do have relationships with Lyft. We do have a relationship with shared car programs. One comes to mind that we established with Electric Power Board in Chattanooga. You can see it. There's 10 shared vehicles. They are Leafs operated by Transmuter in downtown Chattanooga. The folks at the TVA and the Electric Power Board or the city can just walk up, grab, and then go and then bring back. I think as it relates to electric mobility in the shared space, there is a guy I just heard about. He is a Uber driver that has put on 30,000 miles in our car since February this year. I don't know how he's doing it, but I haven't been able to talk to him. But anecdotally, what I would suggest to you that it can be done. And in that shared space, what's remarkable about it is all that vehicle emission, all that the vehicle miles traveled for both himself and the passenger, were all done emissions free. and so they didn't have the same kind of footprint or impact that something had. So I'm pretty excited about it. To Britta's point about what GM's direction is, we have a similar direction. It's almost identical, I think, in a way. It's a little bit different, but our corporate mandate is zero emissions, zero fatalities, with autonomous drive, and that is going to be an electric solution sometime here in the future.
With that, I think we're at time, so we'll wrap up this first panel. But thanks to everyone for taking some time to put this together. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to all of you. And I just want to remind us that some of you will be back at the final panel and for more questions and answers, along with other panelists. And we'll take a 10-minute break and be back here at 10:25 for panel 2 on barriers and strategies.